My name is Paul Grantham, and I'd like to welcome you to Primetime, the Employee Forum. Before we get started today, I have a few quick announcements. Most of you who came in today should have picked up a comment card. It looks something like this. Those of you online, there should be a survey link available on the screen. If you're looking at the box, it's probably somewhere right about here. If you would either take the survey after, if you're online, or return these comment cards, we use these to help plan our future events. So we should appreciate you taking the time to do that. For those of you who haven't participated in Primetime before, basically breaks out into two segments. So we'll invite our guest up here in a minute, and we'll have a discussion about our topic today, which is Digital Duke and this convergence of communications and technology. And then about halfway through, we'll open it up for audience Q&A. So those of you who are here in the audience, if you would raise your hand, we'd like to get one of these microphones to you so that not just the people here in the audience can hear you, but the people online as well. If you're watching online, there is a form on the website there. If you submit your questions there, we have someone here on site monitoring those questions, and we'll try to get those asks of our guest here as well. Now, before we get started, we thought a good way to introduce this topic around Digital Duke is to show you a short video that was done recently that talks about how technology is really changing the foundation of how we do things, including education. So if we could show that video quickly.
This is Duke University.
How do we make distance shrink? How do we collaborate with each other asynchronously around the world? How do we use technology to make education even better?
Duke is a place that gets it. It understands the way modern technology infused with real substance can make a real difference for how education happens or how research happens.
Students need to have a global imagination if they're going to be leaders in any vocation in the 21st century.
What we really want to do is think of Duke as being a networked global presence. Not campus here and single spot there, but actually a network in which we'll be the largest node, but they will have these other nodes, and technology is going to enable that.
I'm a firm believer that you have to have as powerful a network as possible so that you don't limit things from the start. You can't go on to do strategic and innovative projects unless people know reliably day to day that you've got basic underlying infrastructure, from pervasive wireless to voice over IP to mail systems that are up 24/7.
In a university, you're never interested in technology as an end in itself. You're always interested in it as a means to the end of education and its many challenges.
Technology cannot be seen as a solution. It is never the solution to the problem, but it can enormously enhance how we can arrive at solutions. First of all, we can bring teams together across much greater distances, so you can get the right people combined across greater distances with greater efficiency. Second of all, you can stagger those interactions in more effective ways. I don't have to do everything synchronically. I can also do it asynchronically.
We've been experimenting with these asynchronous collaboration tools that will allow us to bring together teams of people, to share material online, to click a button and call somebody, to share videos. These are all ways that we'll be able to bring the campus together. Increasingly, what we're finding are courses that are experimenting in the way the information is delivered outside of class, and then a change in dynamic of what's occurring in the classroom. Then we can think about the classroom time as being much more the interactive, students working in group-based learning, faculty assisting and guiding, but not lecturing to students necessarily.
Duke has done a really good job of making smart use of technology, and that's going to be one of the key differences between universities, especially as we start doing some of this globalizing the institution. We have to make better use of collaborative technology because we can't just walk down the hall to talk to somebody.
Language is the principal tool we have for bringing minds together, but now it turns out that other forms of technology are able to amplify the power of language and bring more minds together in more ways.
Online at duke.edu.
So we're very fortunate today to have with us two people who are responsible for a lot of the changes that you saw in that video. So please welcome today Tracy Futhey, CIO of Duke University and a VP for the Office of Information Technology, and Mike Schoenfeld, the Vice President for Public Affairs and Government Relations. So Mike, let me start with you. The world seems to have changed, a fundamental shift. Can you describe how people are communicating differently these days?
Well, I think that the way that people communicate has changed dramatically, certainly in the last 10 years. It's sort of been a cliche to say the world is different today than it was a few years ago. But when you think about what Duke does, education, research, patient care, service, interaction with society, virtually every aspect of our mission has been affected, in some cases dramatically affected, by technology, by some ability of people to get information in a way they couldn't before. And when you think further about that, every way that people interact with Duke has changed dramatically. So 10 years ago, people actually sent paper applications to Duke University. They would write out, they'd put them in things called typewriters, and maybe even to printers, and they'd write applications. This year, we received almost 30,000 applicants for our freshman class. Virtually all of them, I think you could probably count a couple of dozen that were not submitted in some form online. So the way that we interact with patients through the health system has become increasingly through the digital environment. Not just what we do, but how people interact with us and how they get their information has changed. I could tell you a lot of statistics about how people get news, how people get information about institutions, how institutions communicate with individuals, how individuals communicate with each other. But we have a brief video that I think really illustrates in a much more creative and clever way than I could how that happens. So let's watch that real quick. the information in there is, if anything, out of date even a month or 2 or 3 after the production of that video. And the last thing I would say is that virtually every fact, every piece of data that was referenced in that video, it would be what the technologists or what the scholars or what the consultants would call disruptive. So imagine when you have just an endless number of disruptive technologies and activities affecting the way that that we as an institution do business, the way that we communicate with our constituents, the way that we interact among ourselves, and you have a recipe for a very active technology environment for a university, probably more so than for most other kinds of enterprises like us.
A lot of new tools, and I guess, Tracy, one of the questions to follow up on that with, this explosion of new tools, how is the technology behind that supporting all these new advances?
Yeah, it's interesting because the explosion of new tools comes in several forms. Most obviously, there are the devices, just getting smaller and smaller and more capable, right? Your cell phone is now your computer, right? And your computer is now your TV. And all that demands an infrastructure and a set of background access to technologies that we all want and should be able to take advantage of and take for granted. So, there are now becoming pervasive wireless networks everywhere, cellular networks everywhere. But those are the pieces that are oftentimes under the covers in the technology world, but are the lifeblood of what will make these new technologies succeed or fail. So one of the things that we're seeing and really focusing in on quite a bit is not only the underlying infrastructure on the network side, but also the tools, whether they are social networking tools that can be used in the educational process, whether they're ways to bring rich media and groups together, such as collaboration tools, asynchronous or synchronous, as the provost mentioned in that video clip. All those are again, under the covers pieces, because the big push in the last few years has been the proliferation of these technologies at a consumer level, right? 10 or 15 years ago, I could decide as the CIO what technologies you would use, but today that's no longer the case. In fact, it's oftentimes the case that the first person who shows up on campus with a new technology or tool isn't necessarily on the IT team, right? It's a student, it's an advanced, somebody who's interested in a particularly advanced program. And so these things just proliferate. And so the best you can do is make sure you've got, first and foremost, the most powerful underlying network you can, because that's the piece through which all this needs to hum.
Right. So is Mike the person on your door most often with new tools?
Mike is up there. Yeah, he likes his technology, and I think rightly so. I mean, technology has pervaded everything we do, right? And so, I could just as easily be up here talking with someone, whose area of expertise is, the public safety function, right? Or is the facilities management function, or is a dean teaching programs internationally, because technology is in every single one of those things. But I think Mike has a special understanding and recognition and appreciation for how totally intertwined those are. They aren't just tools in his world, and that's why we're here together, is they really depend upon each other. The technology without communication doesn't do us very much good, and the communication these days without advanced technology and rich media technology to deliver it through really doesn't do as much. How much do we do in video in terms of communicating stories and information relative to print, right? Relative to online.
All of these things are. I think that's one message we'd always want to convey. All of these things are interconnected. It's very easy to develop a communications plan, to develop a communication strategy, to deal with the management of issues or crises or controversies. If our network doesn't work with complete reliability, then we might as well be just talking to ourselves. So these things absolutely and totally connect together. And also, we're not the only ones. We have to remember, we're never going to be the only ones to have a monopoly on technology, on the ability to transmit information back and forth. That's one of the great democratizing factors of social media. People, individuals and institutions have the ability to talk to each other in ways that, again, would have been unimaginable even just a few years ago, and with great impact and with great effect. You know, if something is on Facebook, well, a good example, we have Duke has dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, probably more like hundreds, maybe even thousands of Facebook pages and Facebook sites that are connected to various departments and programs at the university that are managed at the local level. The page that's got probably the largest number of fans is 60,000, with 60,000 plus, is the Duke University page. So every time we put something on the Duke Facebook page, it immediately and instantly goes to 60,000 of our most interested and passionate members of the audience, and they act on that. So things move pretty quickly, and they move with great volume.
But even closer to home, right, in terms of how we get our communication, today's a perfect example, right? You know, the last time I did one of these sessions 4 or 5 years ago, the only people who participated were the people who physically came to this location. But these days through, and I wouldn't even say it's the wonders of technology, it's making this technology pervasive and so easy to use that people can now not only attend in person, but they can sit in their offices and work and watch. They can gather together in groups, all this via the internet, and heaven forbid they might even be, you know, who knows who on the internet watching and listening now, or watching and listening later when we make this available in an archive for anyone to check into any time. So very, very different modes of communication.
So you've both mentioned video in terms of a new tool and technology. Can you describe kind of how Duke is starting to use this tool differently to communicate?
Well, let me start by just from and we all have an interest in the content side. I think there's no one way that Duke is using video to communicate. The ability to produce and distribute video quickly, easily, at virtually no cost has transformed everything from employee communication. So we do a lot of how-to kinds of videos. To the presentation of the intellectual life of the campus. Something that I'm excited about through our Duke On Demand service is the ability to present to the world in a coherent way the whole range of activities that take place at Duke on a regular day: speakers, lectures, events, student activities, sports events, all kinds of stuff that we can now show people. So you've got that. The way that video has been infused into teaching and into learning is changing and multiplying every day. So I'd say it's not so much the fact that we have video, it's the fact that now video is as ubiquitous and as easy to do as writing. You know, I could pull out my phone, take a video, and probably without missing a beat here, we could upload it to YouTube and we could be watching it within 30 seconds. Now, flip side is that means that everything is on camera. And there's been more than one occasion around here in the last couple of years where I have learned about something that's happened on campus, not because the official channels worked, but because somebody posted a video to YouTube of something taking place on campus that was happening literally while it was happening. So video gives you a great tool, but it also means you're always playing catch up.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And we've been really experimenting with video years ago, and then have so much video that we're using in every aspect of technology right now. We started with students probably 8 years ago or so, recognizing that video would be an important basic computer literacy tool for many students into the future, and so started having programs where students produce their own videos. And at that time it was a big deal, and relatively few knew how to do it. And these days, you know, they're all doing it, and the tools are now so easy. You know, grab your flip video camera, record it, edit it yourself. You know, your grandmother can do it practically, right? It's that easy, and it's that point that then turns that use of the media into something that is so pervasive that now we've got to think again, back end. Oh my gosh, the storage capability for the roughly 4,000 lectures that we captured last semester for courses that wanted to record and store for students to subsequently review. That takes up a whole lot of space on the network. And so again, then you're looking for the use. As the provost described it, technology isn't the answer. It's what you're trying to do, and then how does technology support it. But as soon as you start talking about video, you're talking about a whole exponential growth in the amount of not only the transmission on the network, but the storage capacity that we need to archive all these materials. So video has become probably the most popular, by bandwidth certainly, use of the network these days. And that's probably been, we've been watching this trend increasingly. And so now, through the powerful networks, through the use of video, I can sit down and watch a video, have a video conference anywhere on campus, including in the gardens, right, if that's the place where I prefer to have my video conference, or to watch my lecture that I need to catch up on in preparation for an exam tomorrow. Either way, video is everywhere in everything we do, and it's a huge force to be contended with from the infrastructure standpoint.
Yeah, probably the biggest challenge, I would say, is that for all of the advances, as we all know, for all the advances in technology and the ability to deliver information, we still only have 24 hours in a day. And watching a 5-minute video, even if you sort of fast forward and jump around, still takes 5 minutes. So if somebody can figure that out, maybe in the physics department, we would be in much better shape.
The students, for the last few years, we've been recording lectures to help out the School of Medicine and using some technologies there. And it turns out one of the most fundamentally required features of the record system we would use is that you can be able to play back at double speed, because that's how they double their time, is they listen to the lecture at double speed. So I don't know if it ends up being sort of the chipmunk thing or what, but they can, in fact, get that 5 minutes down to 2.5. And again, that's a technology as long as you're willing to make the trade-off.
Right.
The secret is out.
The secret is out.
So let's kind of take this conversation now to where Duke is headed. So in the global arena, as we begin to expand our activities in the global sphere in China and elsewhere, how does technology play a role in this, and how are things changing on the technology front?
Yeah, this has been an area that's been growing and evolving for years. We've obviously had global programs for as long as most people here can remember, right? But the ways in which technologies are now being utilized in those is starting to be very different and quite powerful. If you look at some of the programs like Duke Engage, where students will take their flip camera, they'll go out, they'll produce basically a video journal or a video blog of their activities in another country doing their community service work, and be able to bring that basically back to the community here. And it's really creating a rich opportunity for students who might never have left Durham, North Carolina, to see and experience the different cultures and aspects. If we think about the more formal physical campuses, the campus in China is certainly one that is taking quite a bit of attention and careful planning around how we'll deliver the technology to enable a campus in China, but keep it connected and keep it networked and a part of Durham. Because what I think people recognize as a core strength of Duke's is the people connections, is the collaboration that occurs. And so one of the things I think that we're most intensely trying to make sure we enable in the China campus is a community at a global scale, and how can technology help to support that? So we've been actually in the IT side working on this for a couple of years. How do you have networks that are sufficient to carry it? How do you make sure you have the ability to do both synchronous and asynchronous communication? Because even though there's only 24 hours in a day, the hours that Durham, North Carolina overlaps, right, with China, our campus in China will only be maybe an hour or so of day, and that's even pushing the work day. And so you need to have not only the synchronous communications, but the asynchronous communications, these social networks and powerful ways for people to build communities and collaborate and comment on the work and participate. But it can be really powerful if we get it right. Because now we've got, students 12 hours offset who might be working on a project with students over here, and I'll go to bed having submitted the work I did, and when I get up tomorrow morning, actually, my teammates will have done a whole lot more work. So, you can almost think about whether that's faculty-researcher collaboration, whether that's student project work, really extending the days in interesting ways.
Clearly, digital media will be the way that we communicate mostly overseas. And outside the United States, we're most likely not going to be producing any more publications or other kinds of things in different languages. And we've started that activity in several different places. So, for instance, if you go to the Duke homepage, you will see 8 different words in languages other than English that will link you to information about Duke in those languages, in Hindi, in Chinese, in Japanese, in Russian, in Spanish, in French, because it's a start. It's not obviously a full, robust website, although we will be getting to that point over time. We're just really constrained by time and resources, but we're moving along in that direction. At the same time, we have to be also vigilant about the ways in which Duke is presented and portrayed in the digital realm outside of our purview. So we have found very interesting websites in China and elsewhere that have appropriated Duke content. Pictures, one even appropriated the entire design of the Duke homepage, used our pictures, replaced the text with Chinese text, and it was for an English language teaching program, test prep company in a Chinese city. So we're now engaged in I'm not sure whether it's battle or negotiations with intellectual property lawyers in China to get that taken down, the same way that we would if we found that it were happening in Los Angeles or Chicago or any place else. So more opportunities, exponentially more content that we're going to have to deliver, and likewise exponentially more information that we're going to have to monitor.
Yeah, 2 recent examples that kind of come to mind for me. One was the broadcast of the Duke basketball game in Mandarin, in terms of helping to build community that way. And then I know, Tracy, you've mentioned telepresence. Can you speak a little bit more about what that is and how that works and with our FUCA program?
Yeah, sure. So telepresence is, if I were to use shorthand and recognize the shorthand doesn't fully convey it, but sort of video conferencing on steroids. But even that doesn't describe it, because the technology is such that the people on the other side of the screen are life-size, and you really feel as though you're in there. The sound is such that you can hear that it came from that side of the room. It's quite different from any kind of video technologies that I'd been using for many years. And so what we did about a year ago was opened up a facility in the Fuqua School of Business. Again, this was the early planning stages and things in advance of thinking about the global campuses and how we would collaborate at a global level. And what we built was a lecture hall that is probably similar in size to this facility, has about 150 seats, and has 3 screens in the front. We're able, there was a clip of it at the beginning of that video that you saw, and it really does allow us to bring guest speakers or visitors into a classroom and have it feel as though they are just as present and just as engaged and can make exactly the same eye contact with people back of the room, front of the room. The technology on the other side for the person who's remote lets you zoom in once somebody asks a question in the back, in a way, automatically zooms in a way that it really does feel as though you're present and in some ways almost larger than life. And so it's a technology that, this was the first classroom that had been constructed at this scale. And so we really, it was quite a bit of an experiment to know whether or not that feel like you're really there and feel like you're meeting the person face to face would carry through in a facility of that size. And I can say firsthand, and any of you who have seen it can probably echo that it does feel as though the person on the screen is just as present, in some ways even more present, because they're so high on the screen looking out at you. And so it really is a pretty compelling way to extend the Duke community beyond the borders of Durham, North Carolina, and to bring speakers in from all around the world, to teach people all around the world with an instructor here. It's really quite been quite impressive and compelling in the early uses.
It is quite striking for those who haven't used it yet, and almost certainly you will. You can actually make eye contact and follow somebody's, have a one-on-one conversation with somebody in a way that as good as Skype is, even you couldn't even begin to imagine it. But I want to add one thing to what Tracy said. All of this is very exciting. It's transformative. But let's also not forget that what Duke does, at least on the educational front, is provide a very intense residential educational experience for roughly 6,800 undergraduate students. That's not going to change. You know, if we were in a different kind of business, or we had a different model, we might say, oh, you know, we can do all this cool stuff and we'll have 20,000, or in the case of the University of Phoenix, 400,000 students, because after all, it's just an internet connection. That's not what we do. So all of the things that we're talking about here, and I think all the things that people are throughout the institution are engaged in, are really focused on extending the ability of the university to really do what we do well. And that's an important distinction, because it can sometimes appear when we get enthusiastic about technology that we're thinking opportunistically. Oh, we can just do more of it for the sake of doing more of it. And while that may be tempting to some, that's not our mission. That's not what we're doing.
You know, one of the greatest uses that I heard in the last semester around the telepresence classroom in the Fuqua School was some students in the MBA program having a class discussion about, I'm not sure whether it was a production technique or what it was. One of the students who's in this executive MBA program is saying, well, you know, we use that, we do that back at our place, and within 12 hours they had brought in, via telepresence, 3 people from this company to have an interactive discussion with the class about how it worked, how it didn't work, what went well, what didn't. You know, that kind of a serendipitous use of the technology to probe one particular aspect of course discussion that was particularly relevant to the pedagogy, you couldn't have done it. And yet, the purpose of having the technology was aimed in completely different directions, right? To help do this more formal teaching. And here are these wonderful, unexpected uses that are just coming up every day because the technology's there, it's under the covers, it doesn't take a lot to use, and it is quite striking in terms of its capabilities.
Well, if I can give you one example, a fun one that I had that I had personally, I taught a course last year at the Sanford School in politics, media, and public policy. And I had as a guest speaker one of our distinguished alums, John Harwood, who's a reporter for the New York Times and a television reporter for NBC and for CNBC. John was in their studios, was in his office in Washington, D.C. We did it by teleconference to a conference room on campus. And he talked with the students for about an hour. We talked about all the things that we would want to talk about. Then he put on his makeup, and we watched him put on his makeup and talk about what he was going to say in the 7 o'clock CNBC news report that he was going to be speaking on. So he put on his makeup, he leaves the chair, goes across the hall to the TV studio. We switched to watching the cable, to watching CNBC. He had told us what he was going to say and how he was going to say it. We watched him deliver the newscast, and then he came back into the room for the video conference and dissected what actually just happened on the air and why he said what he said. So for the students, it was a phenomenal experience. It was the equivalent of a field trip to the Washington Bureau of NBC without leaving campus and without leaving the confines of the classroom, and then we can go on and do other things as well.
Very nice. Well, I want to leave some time for audience questions, and I want to start with some questions that were submitted in advance. So one of these questions is, at the Nicholas School, I've seen several new technologies appearing in the last 2 years. Telepresence, flip video cameras, WordPress, large touchscreen directories, etc. To what extent does research/teaching drive acquisition of these new technologies? And to what extent are these technologies acquired in hopes that research teaching need is met?
I would say it's consistently the former, that it's in support of the needs, but admittedly sometimes at the early edge, right, of that. When we built the telepresence classroom in Fuqua, which, as I said, it sort of was the first of its kind, so very much in the forefront, we started with conversations with the technology leaders and the faculty in Fuqua about what are the use cases. Tell us the 4, 6, 8 ways in which you think this facility would be used and would enhance your teaching. And then we can figure out how to put the technology in, not an issue of technology per se driving. The flip video example is another one. You know, we've been using that with courses for many, many years, and in some ways it was the outgrowth of some of the iPod project in terms of how do people record, access video when they're very mobile and when they need to do field interviews and otherwise. So all of these are cases where we have demonstrated need, although the need is at different levels of the spectrum. And sometimes we'll do experiments where it looks like there's a need and maybe not pursue it as quickly if it doesn't materialize as fast.
Yeah, well, it's also useful to remember that we have here pretty much the whole range of how people feel about and use technology. We have people who don't and probably haven't and certainly never will use email. And then we have people whose every aspect of their lives has been digitized. What they do, where they go, how they teach, how they work, how they interact with their family, how they interact with their others is all digital. So everywhere, at every point on that spectrum, you can find somebody or some program at Duke. Doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is at the leading edge, and you know, and our job, and Tracy's job especially, which is such a delicate balancing act, is ensuring that we have the ability to meet the needs of all of those people, but also encourage and be an evangelist so that we're taking advantage of the best ways to do things.
Let me do one more that got submitted in advance, and then we'll open it up to the floor. This one's around centralization and decentralization. The number of customized solutions developed in and out of house, as well as the number of duplicate solutions, still astounds me. What is being done to rein in both to save cost and to better serve Duke?
So this is a delicate balancing act, right? I tell people the balance between centralized and decentralized is just a pendulum. And your best bet is if you can locate it in the middle, because there are surely things that are much better done locally, and so decentralization. The decentralized units are much quicker to develop and implement a solution that meets Mike's needs tomorrow, right? Central IT is much better at developing a solution that 10,000 people can use, right, securely in the same consistent way. The costs of doing those things also vary. And so really the key and the challenge, I think, is to constantly be paying attention to that pendulum swinging between centralized and decentralized. And clearly in a period like the last couple of years when there's been so much of emphasis on cost, thinking about more common solutions, more cost-effective solutions has been part of the discussion that we've had through the DART program and otherwise. And so we have tried to find ways to shift that pendulum a little bit. But I'm the first to say, and perhaps a little bit of an outlier among my peers, I'm the first to push back on getting too much centralization. I think too much centralization can actually hurt the institution, because we benefit from the grassroots ideas and implementations that we can then wait and see, right? Are there a few that are really coming up to the top? So there's been, I think, really good work over the past 2 years to find some things we could do more commonly, more consistently. Can we leverage better deals with vendors, right? Can we find ways that we don't all have to do things that are that are the common activities in different ways. So I think we've made some good progress on that, but I also think we have to be careful not to push so hard toward homogenization that we would end up hurting Duke, maybe saving money today, but hurting Duke 3 or 4 years from now. If Fuqua wasn't pushing the envelope with some of their global programs and was using all of Central IT, soup to nuts for all of their support, then we probably wouldn't have had some of the experience and successes we've had around this advanced telepresence deployment, around some other tools we're working with them now that combine some of the social media with learning technologies. And so Duke has benefited a great deal by both centralization and decentralization, just done in the right balance, and that's a tough act.
It is a tough act, and I think there are some things that will always need to be centralized. The network, you can't have you can't have dozens and dozens of different units managing the network. We all rely on the network, but when it comes to innovation and to more things that are more highly specialized, you absolutely need to have that ability to innovate, to be creative, to be local. Yeah, and the issue of centralization versus decentralization is not limited to technology. We all know that. It pervades every aspect of the institution. And I'm reminded of, if you look at surveys about how people feel about political leaders, they all say that they hate Congress, but they love their congressman. And I think within universities you have some of that. Everybody believes there are too many X, whatever X is, except for mine. Mine is fine, and it works for me. So that's just a needle that all of us in central units have to thread constantly.
Great. I want to make sure we get some questions from our online audience. So let's get a microphone there.
Hi, the first question from online is, I'm very interested to hear about any new strategy regarding Duke's mobile applications. Is Android support in the works? Also, will the adoption of Sakai impact Duke's mobile relationship with Blackboard in any way?
So Mike and I worked very early on several mobile technologies and strategies. We have the m.duke.edu site that's a generally available web presence for any cell phone, internet-based. And then we worked to build probably one of the earliest implementations of online mobile presence in the iPhone, and then continuing on to the BlackBerry and the Android. We've actually just released the Duke Mobile app to the Android. So this has everything from maps to videos. We've got thousands and thousands of images from the library. You can check out what campus eatery is open or closed, bus schedules. It's a pretty powerful app. Again, it's called Duke Mobile, and so it's just within the last week or so, I think, finally got the Android version out.
Yeah, there's probably no part of what we do that is not going to be affected by mobile. So we know as much as we have done over the last couple of years, and there's a lot of exciting stuff. There's still plenty more to do. There is no truth, by the way, to the rumor that everybody who's here gets an iPad, but this is going to be yet another one of the transformative and disruptive technologies, and we have a ways to go to fully build out our capabilities for using all kinds of mobile devices. So I'd say we've done a lot. We established ourselves as a leader, but we're all impatient for the things yet to come.
Yeah, and just to add one more point, I think one of the interesting things that the mobile technologies are now doing are changing the way we think about how we deliver our applications. So, we have a student information system that has everything, or we have a course information system that has everything. And these days with mobile devices, somebody wants to be able to just, click on the app that just shows me, how do I schedule my class? Or click on the app that shows me, what's my assignment tomorrow? And so the reality of these devices, I think over the next 3 years, is going to increasingly create demand and pressure back on us in IT and in other places, people who do development themselves, to sort of disaggregate these big apps that do everything into little component featurized pieces so that I can just click and get right to it instead of navigating through on my laptop, you know, the 5 screens and 30 menus it takes to get there. So I think that's going to be a really interesting trend that the mobile apps will take us into in terms of all the technologies we use.
Yeah, I think one last thing, part of going mobile means unlearning some of the behaviors and activities that we have done at the desktop, and Paul has been very much a critical part of developing our emergency and crisis communications capabilities through Duke Alert, which when it was conceived was very much desktop oriented. The idea was that people would get messages on their email, on the website and elsewhere while they were at their desk or with a laptop or something around. But we've found in the last couple of weeks in our with our snow emergencies, that the majority now, right, of people who were getting picking up the Duke Alert messages about the snow got them from a mobile device.
A growing group.
So I think
we've had
majority,
16-20%, and
yeah.
if you looked at that number a couple of years ago, it would have been a blip on the radar, but now it's certainly growing. In terms of people who are accessing that website now through mobile devices.
Yeah. So what it's led us to do is rethink how we, yet again, how we present and push out information about some of these urgent matters.
Yeah. Other questions? If you're on site, if you'd raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you. We've got another one online.
Increased reliance on technology to communicate, schedule, and teach means system downtime is especially disruptive. What proportion of resources is devoted to keeping the systems up and running 24/7, and would it be a significant cost savings to outsource email and calendaring to a company like Google?
So, so that one is a question you could break down in many pieces. One thing I'll say is a large percentage of OIT's personnel are running systems routinely. But those systems include a couple of hundred, applications, and some of them we run on site, some of them, like the emergency alert, we actually run off site. I think the question about email is, I think, a little more interesting one. We could save some money by moving email off campus. We've looked at that. Moving student email off campus, we don't save much because we still have faculty and staff, and the same people who run the mail system for the students run it for the faculty and staff. So you're really talking about fairly marginal, savings around disk space and things if we move the student population off site. So the real question is whether there's a win in it for Duke to move all of our email off-site. And there's actually a project where Duke is one of 10 universities that right now is in the midst of, we've issued an RFP to ask some vendors whether or not they could provide email service to the entire institution, including the faculty and staff. Now, as soon as we talk about faculty and staff, we have issues of the privacy of the data, who owns it, it's still Duke's data, we don't want it to be mined for any other purposes. There are issues about HIPAA, about research uses that become very, very complex. If there's a vendor that can do that, we will seriously look at it for a cost savings, but it's one of these cases that teasing apart just the student use and still running a mail system for 20 or 30,000 other people really doesn't save you what you could do if you tried to do it all. So we're looking at the question, but we'll see.
Got another one online, and then we'll go to the one on site.
What is the biggest obstacle to technology adoption?
I'll let my friends answer this.
The biggest obstacle?
Since he does all the communication and hears all the people who...
Well, I'd say, like many other things, it's human behavior and how comfortable people feel using different ways to do their business. There are people who, believe it or not, there are people who still don't like to use ATMs. because they feel that somehow is a threat to their privacy, or to which at some level it is, or who don't, like I said, who don't use email, who revel in having an old cell phone that, believe it or not, just makes calls and just receives calls. So there's no easy way to answer that, except to say you could replace technology with just about any other behavior, driving or whatever, fill in the blank. We're fortunate to be in an environment here where we're constantly pushed and tested by the earliest and most excited adopters of technology, namely young people. So by having students constantly refreshing, we're always going to get to get pushed and prodded to be advanced. Although one interesting thing over the last couple of years, as we have talked with and surveyed students, for instance, about the ways in which they keep a calendar. I think this is a great example. If you ask students how do you do your calendaring, expecting, of course, that everybody will be digital, it'll all be on Google Calendar, on their iPhone, or whatever. Still, the most common way that students keep their calendar is on a paper, as a date book. So we could think of ourselves as having all of these great examples here, but even among the earliest and most innovative adopters, there's still a whole lot of low-tech solutions that people use for the way that they live their lives.
I guess my question has to do more with the information we're done with. So we've got numerous sites out there and numerous videos and numerous applications that have kind of run past their prime. And I know the library has digital archives that's starting to keep on things. But when we look at kind of your two different sides, one from a bandwidth data storage sort of view, and another from this information is outdated and now wrong and somehow detrimental, how do we deal with those things that we don't want to have around, but at the same time we're reluctant to get rid of or can't legally?
That is a great question. And if you come up with an answer to it, then I am all ears. We have probably 2 million pages of content
at
on
least.
Duke.edu. I mean, so every year we're adding hundreds of thousands of pages and millions of words and images just to Duke.edu, just to the things that we control. And the ability of our ability as an institution to manage that, monitor it is pretty much impossible to do. So, would it be great if every page had an expiration date, and after a certain, or would it be intriguing? Maybe not great. Would it be intriguing if every page had an expiration date and you had to renew it, or revise the content every 6 months or every year or every month or whatever it is? That would, from a management standpoint, that would be interesting. It would also be impossible. So. We're not the only ones, I'm sure, dealing with this question, and if people have ideas or suggestions, I'm certainly all ears. I know Tracy is as well.
Yeah, I mean, the library and the role of the archives is certainly an important aspect of, and an example of, material may, in the day-to-day sense, have outlived its life on the internet, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's outlived its historic value to the institution. Yep. So how do we continue to have that without necessarily putting it out to the world in a way that it might misconvey, right, aspects of what we've done? I would just, I don't have the answer either, but I would just use it as a launch point to remind folks that it means a couple of things. It means that you should assume that anything you put out on the internet is out there and may be out there forever, or may be reused in different ways than you expected. So digital media in that sense is much more pervasive and lasting than any of us may intend when we sent that quick email in a heated moment, or when we sent that joke to a friend that we knew the friend would take completely in jest. So I think that's another important piece, is that information that we convey digitally, be it through a web page or through email or otherwise, is really, even if it's intended to be private communications, is in a sense some form of a public record. So the reminder to us all, since it's all too easy for us, I think, to forget that.
And I think we all know that Duke has lived through a couple of those situations with some high visibility implications over the last couple of months. So we're reminded of it.
Well, on that note, I think we're out of time, and long live this event on the internet. It will be available in its recording on the Primetime website at hr.duke.edu/primetime. So I'd just like to thank Mike and Tracy both for joining us today and participating. So,
thank you.
Thanks.